In this video, I'm gonna be showing you guys how to wire up Radium's fuel pump hangers with their dual or triple fuel pump setups. So this process will work for a single pump, a dual pump, a triple pump, however many pumps that you have to wire in, this will work for it. So on the table behind me, I've got 2 of Radium's DIY wire kits. We'll go through what they send you, I'll cover the options, and I'll walk you guys through this step by step so that way you can wire in your fuel pumps if you don't want to buy a pre-made harness, because these kits are notably cheaper, I believe at about $70 versus some pre-made harnesses, which can be well over $200. The car we're going to be wiring this up on is a 2015 Plus WRX STI. This process should be pretty much the exact same for any car out there. What Radium gives us with these DIY wiring kits is a relay, some black and some red wiring, I believe this is 10 gauge, a fuse holder, one 25 amp fuse, some solder sticks, some of these eyelets. This stuff in the center came with the fuel pump hanger, which we'll cover in a minute. The Honeywell Hobbs switch is an additional option you can get if you are running multiple fuel pumps. So say you only want one of your 450s or 525s or 535s running when your car is at idle or you're just driving around. This Hobbs switch will keep the secondary fuel pump from turning on. So what this does is this has this connection here. One end of this connection is going to go to a ground source, typically the battery. The other side of this is going to go to the negative terminal of the fuel pump. So when this sees X amount of pressure, it will complete this ground, which will then allow the fuel pump to be grounded to be able to turn on. So we're gonna cover how to wire all of this up. The first thing that we're gonna start with are these relay packs here, and we're gonna go ahead and actually cut a wire off of these and then talk about what all of these wires do. So these are gonna be our relays from Radium. It's a standard 5-wire relay. So I'm gonna go ahead and actually peel off this electrical tape here because we're gonna be cutting this off. So on this relay, you're gonna see 3 different colors. You're gonna see a blue wire, which is typically going to be your trigger wire to activate the relay. You're gonna see your ground wire here, which as obvious will be your ground for the relay. You're gonna see 3 of these red wires right here. The one that's right in the middle, we're gonna go ahead and remove that wire. You can either de-pin it or cut it off. I'm just going to be cutting it flush on this to get that out of the way, because we only need 4 wires off of this. We're gonna do the same thing with the other relay here. Now we're just left with 4 wires on each of our relays. Blue wire is going to be our trigger. That's going to be a 12-volt trigger source. For us, that's going to be the factory fuel pump trigger, or the factory fuel pump 12-volt source. The ground, we're gonna ground this to the chassis in the back of the car. One of these red wires is going to go to the battery. The other side of the red wire is going to go to the fuel pump assembly for one of the fuel pumps. That's why we have 2 relays here. We don't want our fuel pumps to be running simultaneously all the time, so we're gonna have them controlled by 2 different relays. Now additionally, something that you're gonna have to keep in mind, based off of the fuel pump that you're using, you're going to have to figure out how many amps that fuel pump is going to pull. So for us, we have 2 Wall Bureau 450s. So if I go on here, I go to Google, I can type in Wall Bureau 450 fuel pump amp draw. Looking at this chart, you can look at the maximum pressure and the maximum voltage that fuel pump's going to draw, and you can look at the amperage, the amp pull on it. So the maximum amount of amps that fuel pump is going to draw is 19.96, so about 20 amps. The fuses that Radium gives you are 25 amp fuses. So they give you the proper fuse and everything like that for these bigger pumps. Now keep in mind, when you're doing this, you have to make sure that you are using the proper gauge wire when you wire up your fuel pumps. There is a formula you can do, there's websites you can go to. I'll actually pull up a little chart for you guys. So you can pull up a wire gauge amp chart, and what this is gonna tell you is the maximum amperage that a wire gauge can handle before it catches on fire. Because I've seen this happen before where somebody will use too small gauge of wiring. The fuel pump or whatever you're trying to power is gonna pull too many amps, and it's gonna cause this wire to melt, catch on fire, and then catch your car on fire. And I do wanna touch on this because I have made this mistake in the past. Do not wire both of your fuel pumps to one 10 gauge wire. 20 amps, you're gonna be pulling roughly 40 amps through a 10 gauge wire that's only rated for 30 amps. Don't do it. If you want to be able to just run one wire from the battery to the back of the car where your fuel pumps are gonna be, combine the amperage and go 1 step above. So 20, we'd be at 40 amps if we wanted to run both our fuel pumps off of 1 feed wire from the battery to the fuel pump location. So I would do at minimum 6 gauge wire if I was doing that. So Now that I've kind of gone in the weeds a little bit with this, let's go into the back of the Subaru and start finding a home for our relays. Once we found where we're gonna mount these up, we can jump to actually wiring everything in. First thing that we're gonna do is go ahead and tackle the grounds. So pump 1 and pump 2 grounds in here are gonna come out, feed through this factory grommet that I have coming out here and going up to the chassis here. After we do each wiring step, I'll come through here and I'll show you guys kind of how I route all of this stuff and how I crimp it all. So let's get to wiring in. We're gonna go ahead and feed our first ground wire through up to our fuel pump assembly stuff. First ground wire, put a piece of heat sleeve over it, grab my crimps and go ahead and, or my crimps, my strippers, and go ahead and strip off the end of this. Grab our terminal, and these are gonna be the slightly larger terminal gauge wire, or the slightly larger gauge terminals that Radium gives you. And another black 10 gauge wire in here to be the ground for fuel pump 2. I'll link these crimps down below. These are probably my favorite crimps. We've got our grounds on here coming out of our terminal over here. Now these are all going to terminate to the chassis up here in the corner where you guys can't really see, but my hand's like up here. So I'm just gonna kind of run these in the orientation that they're going to go. Now we're only gonna have one more ground going back here right now, and that is actually only one of the relays, because the other relay, I misspoke earlier. I said that the hob switch will go to the pump's ground. It actually goes to one of the relay grounds. So I'm going to have this outside relay be the one that goes to the front of the car to the hob switch. So we're gonna go ahead and extend out this other relay's ground wire to be able to meet up here. Actually, we don't even have to do that if we want. We can actually just tie this in to one of the fuel pumps grounds, which we'll probably just do that because in my opinion, I think it's a little bit cleaner to do it that way. To give you guys some better insight, we've got ground 1 right here, ground 2 right there. Both of those wires pass out of this grommet here, come up, follow the factory harness up. If you look right down here on this bolt, you can see this wire come out. It grounds to the chassis there. We have one of the, go up and over. One of the relays comes out, grounds with these wires to the chassis. So we have one relay grounded and both of the fuel pumps grounded. We still have this relay that is ungrounded because this one's going to run to the front of the car to the hubs. What we just did with these grounds, we're gonna do the exact same thing with these 2 red wires here coming off of the bottommost side of the relays. So both of these are gonna get extended out and go to the power studs on both pumps. So one's gonna go to pump positive, the other's gonna go to pump 2 positive. Whatever relay you want to control whatever pump, now's the time you're gonna decide. Let's go ahead and wire up both of these power wires to the fuel pump assembly, so that way our pumps technically will have power and ground. With the fuel pump power wires from the relays, you guys can see it's gonna be these bottommost 2. I add them wrap into this like factory little terminal spot, goes up through our grommet. We've got power and power. So we now have power and ground technically ran to this, even though the relays don't have 12 volts yet. So what we're about to do now is give this first relay its trigger source. So the trigger source for relay powering pump 1 is going to be from the factory connector on your car. In the case of this one, it's gonna be the green wire with yellow stripe right there. So we're gonna remove all the sheathing from the grommet to this connector, and we're gonna cut this connector off. We're also going to pin the 2 wires in here that are dedicated for fuel level sensor. Now with fuel level sensors, fuel temperature sensors, there's no polarity on them, so either wire can go to either side of the sensor. So don't get too caught up on that. Now, this is one question that a lot of people have. If your car has a factory fuel pump controller, do not unplug it, do not remove it, just leave it installed. It's not going to do anything. The only thing that we are pulling from this factory wiring are the fuel level sensor, positive, negative, polarity doesn't matter, and the trigger wire, which is normally the 12 volt wire that would give power to the fuel pump. So that 12 volt wire is now just the trigger to the relay, because most cars will have a fuel pump controller, and that fuel pump controller will do a couple, the main purpose of the fuel pump controller per like factory ECMs, it will send less voltage to the fuel pump. So typically it'll operate at a duty cycle of 33%, 66%, and 100%, depending on the load or the demand that you're putting on the car. So we're completely bypassing that. Fuel pump 1 is going to be 100% all the time. Fuel pump 2 will be 100% all the time when it is activated via the Hobbs switch. So if you have a fuel pump controller in your car, a factory one, just leave it alone. Don't touch it unless specified in instructions when installing your Radium hanger or whatever hanger you may be installing. But for the most part, if it doesn't mention it, don't worry about it, don't touch it. So let's go ahead and run this trigger wire, do our 2 fuel level sensor wires, and then we can go ahead and start running the wires from these relays to the front of the car or to wherever your battery might be. I'm gonna leave some excess of this trigger wire in there to make it easier to get the fuel pump assembly in and out, or the lid, since there's that grommet. And this is the last wire that we're going to be feeding through this grommet. I'm going to remove all the sheathing off of this connector and cut this connector completely off. Now I've got these 4 wires. Now before we start putting these in, I need to grab the lid to the fuel pump, to the fuel tank here, so that way we can wire it all like this, so that way we can actually get this lid back on. These 2 trigger wires are going to go together. Green and yellow for this car. I'm actually going to remove the wire that's not being used, which is green and brown, so that way it doesn't actually ever accidentally ever get used in the future. There's still enough on there if they wanted to reconnect it to go back to factory, they can. Now have everything in our fuel tank area wired up. Now it's everything just from the relays to the front of the car. So let me walk over all of this with you guys one more time. We'll get this lid sealed permanently back on, and then start doing the relay portion of this. Everything is done with the exception of the 4 wires left on the relays. So we've got ground power for pump 1. We've got fuel level sensor wires ran from the factory harness. We've got ground and power to the other pump. Now remember, the grounds come out here, go up and ground to the chassis up here, with the exception, or with the addition of one of the relays tied into that. We also have both of the powers coming through here, going one to each relay here. So all we should have left at this point, if we are using a Hobbs switch, is the 2 power wires that are going to go to the fuses up in the front of the car that we're going to add in, 1 trigger wire, which is also going to tie into these 12-volt wires here, and then 1 ground, which is going to run up to the front of the car to the Hobbs switch. Now, if you are having both of your pumps run all the time and you're not using a Hobbs switch, this other relay is going to get grounded with the other one. If you are using the factory relay or the factory trigger to trigger the other relay, you're going to tie this other blue wire into your factory one. We are not. That is getting tied in with all of this stuff for the Hobbs switch. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and get this cover put back on, clean up these little wires right here, and we're going to start running these wires up to the front of the car. Now we're going to jump over to the fuses, and we're going to do reverse. So we're going to run these fuses to the wires that we have at the relays. So with these fuses, 1 wire is going to go to the positive side of the battery, the other side is going to go to the relay. On the secondary pump relay, the trigger wire is going to tie into the fuse because it's just going to be on all the time, and the Hobbs switch is going to trigger the ground to turn it on. All this wire, this was not me. I conveniently mounted both of the relays right here. There's this like little shroud piece that'll cover everything up beautifully from Subaru, so you won't even be able to see them, but they'll still be easily accessible if you need to disconnect them to be able to pull the fuses out. I would suggest making these readily available, so if you do need to disconnect the fuel pumps for any reason, you can easily do so. So we're gonna get the Subaru up in the air a little bit, pull off the, what was this, driver's side wheel, and start running these wires to the back of the car. Also gonna run some 14 gauge wire back there as well for the ground for the other relay, and this is going to go to our Hobbs switch. So we're not gonna mess with the Hobbs switch quite yet, but since we're already running these wires back there, we might as well run the third. We have all of our power and ground wire, or 2 power wires in our ground wire, ran up through here, secured up to the harness, and then we have these little retaining tabs that we like slid it into. So now our wires are inside of the car, so we need to run them back and across to the relays. Now that we've got our wires ran back here, we'll go ahead and wire them up. So the trigger wire and the power wire off of pump 2's relay is going to go to just the power. So 2 wires to 1. The ground is going to go to our Hobb switch ground, and then the other power is going to go to the other wire coming from the fuse up at the front of the car. Looking at our relays, on fuel pump 1, we just have the power side of the relay going to the battery or to the fuse up front. On relay 2, we have our ground that's going to go to the Hobb switch, which is this blue one here. And then on the blue wire for our trigger and the power, both of those just get direct power from the relay. So all of these can now just kind of tuck down like that. Carpet can come back and over, and you don't even see them. So now that we've got the relays and the fuel pumps all wired up, all we have left to do is hook up the relay or the fuses to the battery and wire in the Hobb switch, which both of those should go by pretty quick. I like to combine my 2 power wires into a singular, like a singular stud, not a singular wire, or a singular post, so that way you don't have multiples all going to the same spot. Here we've got both of our power wires, and these will screw on here and hook up to the power to the battery. So that will provide 12 volts to the relays, which will then send 12 volts to the, bend this down a little bit, which will then send 12 volts to the fuel pumps. So that, super happy with how that came out. We can actually go ahead and put this shroud back on. I don't know what the hell's going on here with all this other wiring that he did. This, like I said, this was not me here. Okay, don't judge me. You can't see any of the fuel pump wiring. All these wires here are not from the fuel pump. They're from his bags that he did. So all we have left to do is this Hobb switch, which is gonna be this wire. And we're gonna wire this to the Hobb switch. We have to figure out where we wanna mount it. So we'll figure out where we wanna mount the Hobb switch, run this wire to the Hobb switch, and then out of the other side of the Hobb switch, it's just gonna ground to the chassis or the battery. We're probably just gonna go to the chassis. Grab one of the little yellow grommets that they send you, and you're gonna slide that down the wire with the skinny end kind of facing the end of the wire, and the fat end, the fat ribbed end on the opposite side. And we're just gonna push this down this wire a little bit, strip off the very tip, slide the crimp back up where it's flush with your cut. So similar to this, you're gonna take the terminal that Radium gives you, and that's gonna hug the grommet area, and then the open exposed area of this is going to go around your exposed wire. Now you will need some specialty pliers. I'll link these down below. You can get away with using like a normal set from AutoZone or O'Reilly's or wherever you go, but your crimp may not be the strongest. Just keep that in mind. And then give it a little bit of a tug test. Connector for that, and then you're going to insert it. It's going to be the 2 connections on the outermost side. So do not go into the middle hole of that. Only the far left and the far right. The wire will only go in one way. If it doesn't go in one way, flip it around. Try again, feel it slide all the way in. So before you push this red lock down on the end of it right there, what we're gonna do is go ahead and add another wire to this, about the same length. I already know where it's gonna ground. If there's any excess wire on this, we can tuck it away. I'd rather have the ability to mount this sensor in various spots than be kind of locked into one position. Crimp her down. Passes. Now we'll shove it in here. Push the red lock down. So now these wires will not come out. So I want to be able to ground this to the chassis. So I'm going to go ahead and actually just kind of keep these together somehow. Bring my hand back. And then kind of measure out where I'm going to have this go. I'm going to add an eyelet to that. Ignore all of these wires right here. So right here we have our Hobb switch with a nipple on it. So this will go to a boost source. This sensor is set to about 15 PSI out of the box, I believe, and there's 2 wires going to it. One wire is going to the relay as the relay's ground instead of grounding to the chassis. The other wire grounds to the chassis right down here. So as this sensor sees 15 PSI, it will complete the circuit, allowing the relay to ground. Once the relay is grounded, the secondary fuel pump will kick on in the back. So the secondary fuel pump will only be running when the car is above 15 PSI boost. That's how this works. Very simple, very easy, 2 wire switched ground that works off of pressure. So with that, we have our dual Radium fuel pumps installed and wired in. I've just got the feed line going into a fuel container, hook up the battery here, and I'm going to go key the car on, and we'll see if we got fuel. I hear the fuel pump, and there's fuel, baby. Oh, damn. Sick. And there we go. That is it, you guys. That is how you wire up Radium's DIY fuel pump wiring for your 450s, 340s, whatever fuel pumps you got in there. I know it looks confusing and I know it looks daunting the first time you do it when you're just staring at these wiring diagrams. If you understand the diagram, they're not too bad. If you don't understand the diagram, hopefully this video helped you out. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them down in the comments below and I'll try to help as much as I can. But with that, that's all I got for you guys on this one. So if the video helped you, go ahead, hit that like button, turn it black, blue, green, yellow, purple, silver, cyan, whatever color it turns for you. And if you're not subscribed and you want to be for more of our builds or the DIY stuff or whatever it may be, I'll put it in one of these corners. No idea which one quite yet, but with that, I'll catch you guys in the next one. So peace out, homies.